My name is David Bridwell, and I'm a people scientist at Intermark Group. And so I'll be talking about the psychology of digital marketing. And my background is in attention. So that was one of the first things I studied. I was in academia before I came into marketing pretty recently. And then I studied complex human behavior. I looked at brain activity while they did things like watch movies and listen to music, and also while they interacted with each other. And so I started thinking about how two brains sort of align and interact. And I got into playing music. This is kind of part of my transition into marketing, is that I started playing music in public, and I got really sensitive about the energy of the crowd and this notion that, like, this sort of magic that happens when you engage with people at these sort of instinctual levels, which is like music and art and just what we're drawn to and fascinated by, which is a bit different than the sort of structure of academia. And so I actually kind of came upon this realization that marketing is one of the most powerful ways to understand human behavior, because you're right in the thick of these constant changes that are happening, and you have to adapt to them very quickly. And so this is a field that's constantly in tune with the changes that are happening and trying to be on top of it, as opposed to like some fields like politics and science are very slow to adapt to changes. And actually change is sort of not even valued in them. Like in politics, if you change your mind a lot, that's not something that we value a lot. So I'm really excited to be thinking about these things and just trying to understand human culture in this scenario where we don't know how the human brain is going to adapt to our modern environment, where we have all these distractions and where we have this connection to everybody at our fingertips. Because we came up through an environment where basically the number of people that we could interact with was approximately like 120 people. Like the amount of people that we can manage, who's in relationships with whom, who owes me money, who do I get along with, who doesn't get along with, the sort of complex relationship social structures that exist. Our brain is only designed to manage that for about 120 people or so. But now we're in a place where we can express information to a very large group of people, and we have instant contact, and we really don't know the effect that that's going to have on society. Like, we think about it a lot and we talk about it a lot, but really it's going to take decades, maybe even 100 years before we can look back and say, look, this is how human society operates in this type of setting. This is the change in there's like supposedly this like 10-year boom and bust cycle of economics and things like that can all change based on the way that we communicate nowadays. Okay, so these are the main things that I want to be talking about. This is sort of like the general theme is chasing attention and thinking about attention, thinking about engagement and interaction, and empathy and intention, psychological solutions, and social connection. I thought about doing sort of little separate pieces for each of these, but all of these things are interrelated with each other. And so there's sort of this like underlying theme or underlying viewpoint to bring to social media that I think would be useful, because ultimately it's about connecting with people. That's like a very strong human motivation, is to just socially connect. And that underlies a lot of what we do. So your brain never processes the same stimulus in the same way. So the state of your brain in this moment is different from the state of your brain 10 minutes ago, and it's a state that has never existed previously within your brain. And of all the humans that have existed, the state of your brain right now has never existed within another human being. So everybody has this unique exposure to information. And so that means that if you present the same stimulus once, and then you give it to somebody again, the way that they process that a second time is going to be different. And all the things that happen in the intermediate time period can potentially affect how you process that stimulus a second time, including the fact that you've seen the stimulus before. I don't know if you guys have ever seen something pop up on Facebook and you ignore it the first time, and then the second time maybe you're at home and you have a little bit more time, and you're like, okay, now I feel like I should click on my buddy's new song that he posted and show some appreciation for that. So this is just an interesting sort of thought experiment I had related to that, which is, imagine that you had a journal of every single day that you lived, and you look back 10 years ago on what you did during that day, would you be able to remember anything that happened on that one day? There's like a lot of people saying that they wouldn't. Yeah, and even if you're prompted, like this is very interesting. Even if you're prompted for a very specific, strange thing that happened on that day, or is there some days that went by that literally just blur together where there's no memory? And the reason why I think about this is sort of personal reasons, that like this fear of not maximizing my time. So I don't know, I always think about, I recognize that if you do something different, then you're creating a memory for that thing. If you do the same thing, for example, if you go to the same restaurant 5 times, then all those 5 instances where you go are going to blur together in your memory. But if you go to 5 different restaurants, then you're going to keep those 5 different memories. So this is something that I'm always thinking about, of like, go to new restaurants, stay in a new hotel, visit new cities, because you're literally creating new experiences for yourself that you're going to remember as you get older. You know, if you watch a movie, you'll see somebody go into a pub and you'll be like, oh, that pub reminds me of that one pub I went to at that one place. And so it's all adds to the richness of your experience. So you never process the same stimulus the same way. This is an album cover that we had growing up, and it just sat there among all the records. And, you know, it's a lion, but do you guys see anything else besides the lion in there? I guess most people, yeah. We didn't see this for a long time. It was like months, and we were just sitting there and we're like, whoa, look at that record. Do you see everything? There's like 7 faces. You know, there's a face, there's the folded arms that are the mouth of the lion, and then the legs coming through, and the skirt is like the jaw. And there's 2 faces jutting out from that, and then the eyes each have a face in it, and then there's 3 faces above that. So once you know that those aspects exist about the picture, you never process that picture in the same way. You could never see it and just see that lion again. And that's sort of how information accumulates in our brain, is that we can see something one time, then we can learn a new piece of information, and then we'll never see that thing the same way. And you know, in marketing, we often come up with some really great, clever idea, and then you do it, and people talk about it, and it's really great. And then 6 months later, you want to do it again, and people are like, oh, like that's just what marketing looks like. It becomes the standard, and so it's not interesting anymore, and it just blends in with everything. So I think that this example you guys are probably aware of. You know, once you realize that there's an arrow embedded in the FedEx logo, it's hard to see that logo without the arrow in it. And, you know, those are examples that are based on easy sensory processing, simple sensory processing. But I want to extend that example to more complex things. And so the structure of the culture and the structure of your environment dictates the way you view the world and the way you operate in the world. So in this book, Sapiens, some of these ideas come from these various books. So I put pictures of them in there. Just having access to a vehicle changes your own perspective on your individuality. And so, you know, in our culture, we have people, when you grow up, typically kids have their own room, but there's many cultures who would never put the kid within their own room. And we have this mentality that your own opinion of yourself is the key thing, the key factor, not what the group thinks of you. That's sort of how our culture views it. And you have control over your outcome, as opposed to this is your sort of rigid position in society based on some hierarchy. Other cultures are more based on this sort of social collective hierarchy that you're supposed to fit into. So when countries have to think about if they're going to introduce a vehicle to the population, it's not just introducing a vehicle to the population. It's introducing a change in their potential psychology that affects the way they view themselves as an individual, and that can potentially change culture. You know, so marketers, you're affecting the information that people see, and this can also lead to changes in culture and these large-scale things of the way people view themselves. I've been thinking a lot about what was the function of the moon, the trip to the moon. if you believe it happened, which I do. So in 1969, they went to the moon. What was the purpose of that? And a lot of times we think about it was about technology. We invented all these new technology, or we thought that we're so great that we were able to do it. There used to be a cliche that was like, oh, we went to the moon, so we should be able to do all these other things. Like, how could we go to the moon, but we can't solve this, build the right toaster or something like that? But I actually think that the main function of going to the moon might have been psychological, which is that when we went to the moon and we psychologically thought about the fact that other humans went there, we saw that they stepped foot on the moon and they put their footprints, they put down the flag. But they took a picture of the moon from a distance, and viewing that picture might have been the biggest impact because it allowed us to see our position in the universe from a perspective we hadn't seen before. And so the impact of the moon could have been simply that as a species, we were able to appreciate who we are on this planet, and potentially that could be related to why we're so concerned about the environment today. There's a lot of discussion and concern about the environment, and that could be related to that. It's interesting to think of the people who grew up, because the people who didn't grow up experiencing the actual moon landing might not be as tied to that concern for the environment as those who were born after that. So another example is computers. The analogy that we view about ourselves and the brain is that it's like a computer. And the reason we think that is because computers are so prominent in society. So when you have to think about yourself and your position, you just draw from what you have available. And we used to have to, when computers went around, we had a different way of viewing the brain. And artificial intelligence going forward is going to be one of the big ways about how we view ourselves. I want to push back against artificial intelligence and focus on social connections because I do think they're fundamental. So this is just further drawing on this notion that you can change the way people think by their experiences. And in our Alabama tourism work, we displayed a lot of media where people would view scenes from Alabama, like Little River Canyon, and just these landscapes. And they were meant to stimulate all your senses, like your sight and your touch. There was even some taste involved and physical movement. And these all force you to experience the world in a more interactive way. They engage more parts of the brain. And so that's the motivation there. But there's actually recent scientific studies on awe, this notion of awe as a distinct emotion. I don't know if you guys can remember feeling like things in your life that made you feel awe, like going to a concert, probably like going to the football game when you guys are doing really well. When you see political figures give speeches, like prominent figures give compelling speeches, that invokes awe, and these type of landscapes. And it turns out that when people feel these emotions, they become more prosocial. They become less individualistic and they become more collective. It's like they see everything from a larger picture than just themselves. So you can create an environment for yourself that actually changes the way that you view the world and the way you view yourself. So I'm going to try to go hiking soon. So again, thinking about how culture changes, the term designated driver, a lot of times when a word comes up and becomes popular, that has a big impact on culture and the way that we view things. And, so I'm also fascinated by actually like creating new words and changing new words. So, if you don't want to just like copy what everyone else is doing, you want to think a little bit about what type of new phrases and new ideas can I generate, what new hashtags can I generate, as well as like the popular ones that could potentially catch on and promote the type of changes that you want to try to make. So designated driver as a term actually was in the United States started by a group at Harvard who wanted to promote the notion that it's okay not to drink when everybody else is drinking and make it socially acceptable. So they actually came up with the term and they put it in popular culture, they put it in movies and things, And now, we all know that we can go out, and if you tell somebody that you're the designated driver, nobody is going to say they're not going to hassle you at all. It's going to be socially acceptable. So fake news is a new term. Deepfakes is fascinating to me when I talk about, okay, here's the psychology of how just seeing the earth from a large perspective changes our psychology. What's the psychology of seeing videos that are fake, that we don't even trust videos that we see online anymore? And of course, the term fake news is related to how culturally we're trying to process that. But this hasn't even caught on yet. Deepfakes, where you can overlay other people's faces on your own face in videos. And we don't even know the impact of that. Like, are we going to just lose trust in other aspects of society or not? I don't know. It's fascinating things to think about. Do you guys have questions? I feel like I'm just like going full speed ahead here.
Yeah. To clarify, you said the deepfakes is when somebody overlays a face with somebody else in video?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You can make them say whatever.
Yeah. I don't know. Have you guys seen those? Yeah.
Does it have their voice too?
My understanding is the voice is more difficult. It's pretty challenging to do that, but I think they're working on it and getting better and things like that. Yeah.
What would be the purpose of doing that?
What's the purpose of deepfakes? Yeah.
Imagine being able to create an entirely fake video of Trump saying whatever he wants and then just blasting on social media. I don't think people
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you could have one, it could be fake, right? So you could say, look at this video of said senator, cheating on his wife.
Yeah.
Or it could be real, and he's just like, well, that's clearly that's fake. It's not real. It didn't happen. So you
Yeah.
don't know. Do you trust people? Do you not trust people? What's the one?
Yeah. Probably our last election it could have been the last one where we see a video of incriminating stuff and we actually believe that video. It could be that in the future, every other major political election, we don't even believe it or put value to it anymore. And, the whole thing with fake news is that people don't necessarily care if it's fake, is one read I'm getting on it. I don't know if you guys use Reddit, but when there's a fake thing on Reddit, people will say, oh, it's fake. And then somebody will almost always say, yeah, but it doesn't matter because it's conveying the information that should be conveyed. Like it's real in some capacity, even if this one wasn't real. Yeah, we're all heavily interconnected right now. And the one of the fascinating things to me is that we're actually it's possible that people can be experiencing the world in completely different ways. If two people are using Facebook, they can see entirely different Facebook feeds and have two entirely different views on what reality is. And so that impacts how we interact with each other and how we don't understand how other people view other things in the world. And that's just is going to potentially keep increasing because there's no more gatekeepers now. It used to be that whatever TV decided to put on would be what everybody watched. And now everybody has access to talk about what they're passionate about and potentially find people who are passionate about that thing. So social media is social currency. Because when you have people's attention, then you have value to them and you can influence them. And that's like currency. And so the way that we view it in our heads, the way that we value it is similar to how we view currency. And so you've got situations where even teens are coming back to school and they're TikTok famous and things like that. And there's actually, if you look up Gen Z, we've been talking a lot about Gen Z and thinking about them. Just really thinking about people who grew up in this world and how they can view the world differently. There's actually 20-year-olds who are on speaking tours and getting speaking gigs and consulting gigs to tell companies how Gen Z thinks. And this is a fascinating thing to me to see these super young kids who actually have an entryway based on the fact that they actually have that unique perspective. They actually lived through it. So, it's important to have this big picture viewpoint because then you can get a picture for how these sort of things that you put out there can influence society. So this is a billboard that we did for Alabama tourism.
News 5 at 6 o'clock. Alabama tourism officials score a big win in Mobile with a series of ads aimed at promoting Mardi Gras. The signs take direct aim at the carnival in New Orleans with signs in the Big Easy. News 5's Chad Petrie has the story.
Signs like these have been making the rounds online. This one snapped in Louisiana. It's one of 10 signs spread throughout the I-10 corridor telling drivers they are X number of miles away from Mobile.
And you can see that it got a ton of engagement, right? And so that's the whole point of trying to understand human psychological perspective and understanding society so you can be in touch with it. And, to me, it's about having conversations and initiating conversations of things. Because now people know that Mobile was the original Mardi Gras. And you wouldn't have known that otherwise. So you're actually conveying information. So the whole notion of no more gatekeepers, like the amount of things that you could do to potentially be successful is wide open. And YouTube is one potential platform where you can be creative with what you want to express and communicate. So on YouTube, they have these ASMR. It's where you like whisper. And people listen to it. Like, we don't really know what it is about the brain and why we get attached to these like really subtle whispering things. Some people report that it gives them chills. We like unboxing videos. These type of videos get hundreds of thousands of views. And in traditional media with the television, nobody would have ever said, like for slow TV, actually they did it with slow TV. It started with the Christmas log. Somebody had to sit there in a meeting and say, hey, let's put a Christmas log on the TV for hours. And people are going to tune in, I promise. And that was the first start of that. More people watch Minecraft than they watch the Super Bowl. More people are engaging with Minecraft, but you don't know it because it's just sort of just happening on the side. And there's actually elevator enthusiasts. And these are 80% of this group is autistic. And so this is a group with a very specific taste, like you're really getting into the range of human behavior, and they have a place where they can go and engage and communicate. So really changing people's lives involves focusing in on that really narrow appeal. And we can do that nowadays. And, thinking about advertising and marketing, you can, with Facebook, for example, you can target cities. You can send ads to specific cities and say, hey, Birmingham, and, hey, Atlanta, in the introduction. And just adding that touch of personalization of the city name can increase engagement with that city. So I've been thinking about this a lot too, about information is the new gold. So it's really interesting how valuable information is right now. And the way that we talk about it and think about it is just think of parallels with like the gold rush or stock market booms, is that they're like, oh, this is the thing, do this right now, and then everybody does it, and then it busts and goes away. And so people talk about it when they talk about, hey, everybody's using Instagram these days. It's like talking about everybody's into this stock and you should buy this stock. And then when it goes away, it's like and the driving force for why there's these changes like that is related to social currency. It's related to, if you have information that's valuable, that can positively impact people's lives, then you're motivated to communicate that information. So this is another thing that we think about in marketing, is that we know that people are going to talk about things that bring value to other people. And a lot of the ways that we influence other people is by word of mouth, just talking to them. So when you talk to your parents or you talk to your friends, the things that you'll often say is, this is a new restaurant that opened up, or this is a new TV show. And that's because you're bringing value, and that person will psychologically connect with you more if you say things that are interesting. And usually those are things that are different, things that are changes in society. This is somebody who's invested heavily in Facebook ads who keeps coming up, and he feels real anxiety when his Facebook ads fail because he's invested everything in this one idea of Facebook ads. And this is the whole thing. It's like this is they told me there was gold here. I came and the gold isn't quite there like I thought it would be. This is a Google trend of interest in Facebook, and it peaked a while back, and it's declining. And so again, just thinking of how these ideas emerge in our heads and peak in popularity and then decline in popularity, and it's so powerful. It's kind of like a stock market at that point. And so it's like we have these preconceived notions of how the world works and how things work, but it's constantly changing. And so even the website being like this respectable place, it might not always be like that. It might be that the way that we visit websites declines and continues to decline. Like some countries, when they get a phone, they don't even get internet search on the phone. They just get Facebook. They just get social media accounts. So social media has almost overtaken like the way that we find and the way that we look for information. One potential thing to think about too is the fact that people can come across information through voice search in the future. This is the Google interest in Alexa. And just like Google search, it's not this like library, this official thing. It's dictated by many factors, and it has to provide value in advertisements and make itself have value. So being at the end of an Alexa search is a valuable thing to think about. If you can be the answer to what's the nearest fast food restaurant, then you're going to increase the amount of people that go there. And I don't know, do you guys have Alexa? Does anybody? You have one? Nobody else? Does it talk back to you? Do you say, "Hey Alexa"?
No, I use it for like one purpose, which is like rain noises while I sleep. And that's the only
Okay. Does it know what you want to hear? Is that how it works? Yeah. It's like, all right, hey Alexa,
I ask it the
play the
weather
rain.
too. Those are like the only two things. So I don't ask for like nearest fast food restaurant or anything.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I've seen old people. It's really interesting. They actually use their phones for search. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I guess they don't like the typings. So, records outsold CDs last year. Nobody ever would have predicted that could have happened. We never would have thought that we would be getting rides from people in cars, strangers in cars, or staying in strangers' houses.
Like when we were growing up, it was, beware strangers, don't get strangers' cars. And now we literally summon strangers to us to get into their cars.
Yeah. Yeah. And, right, the whole thing is trust. As long as you can have that trust, then it can work out. And so that's why there's so much accountability online with Uber reviews and just even Yelp reviews in general. Like, so important to get positive reviews. The whole thing about taxis, the reason we trust taxis is because there's such a long process to become a taxi driver. So if you've invested hundreds of hours of time and money into becoming a taxi driver, then you're not going to risk that by stealing somebody's money or being a criminal against them, because then you lost all of that time and effort that you put into something. And so even creating those barriers, if those barriers aren't related to actually like driving a taxi, they filter out people and they give trust to us. And that's actually one of the main importance of branding itself, is that it gives responsibility to the company and it gives us our trust. It's not necessarily about having a product that's terrific. It's actually more important not to have products that are terrible. Like, that's really what we don't want, is to have terrible products. It's great if the food is good, but it's really bad if you get food poisoning. And mostly we'll be happy if we can avoid food poisoning. This is satisficing. We're interested in just being satisfied or satisficing. We said, okay, retail stores are going to go away, and then these articles pop up that say they're coming back. And again, like, this is the whole thing. Like, we always need to understand the importance of human connection and word of mouth and face-to-face interaction, because the way we value retail stores is based on the experience. Like, we need you to create an experience for us. And now there's actually tourist locations that become really popular on Instagram as like a place where you go to get Instagram photos, and then the tourist location actually emphasizes that. We used to get excited when people knock on our door, and now if somebody knocks on our door, we freak out because texting is so prominent. And calling somebody on the phone, like in the early stages of dating, if you call somebody on the phone, they freak out. You have to text them. And it's just a part of like recognizing where we are as a society and how you operate in it and being in touch with that. Like, I don't even know how to check my voice messages in my phone. So I've never listened to them, and I don't answer it unless it's a number that's the problem, is that like the most important things and also the like least important things come through the same points. Like, I don't know, these businesses, like, just send me a text message if you could, because like your mail, like I hate checking my mail is a problem, but the most important things sometimes pop up in your mailbox. We had a cultural change in just our view of straws. Like, that is fascinating, and I don't know how that happened, but all of a sudden everybody became on board with the ideas that plastic straws are really bad, among all the other plastic that we could potentially be talking about. And so just thinking of like, how do these changes happen, and recognizing that we don't understand what the future is going to look like, but staying on top of that. I actually have a theory that one day seeing people doing this on their phones is going to be socially shamed. Like, I'm just putting it out there that it's a possibility that you're going to be socially shamed for doing this motion. Just like how smoking used to not be socially shamed, but now it is. I mean, not so much in Alabama, I think, but in general. And it could be because of the app. It could be that the app that makes you do this becomes out of popularity, and they know that this motion is associated with that app, and that'll make you feel bad for doing it in public. I actually took a class like a year ago, but besides being out of the university for a long time before that, like 8 years or something, I don't know. Yeah, but it was amazing. In the breaks during class, everybody was on their phone. And like, this is a chance to talk to people about the information that you've learned. Like, that should be kind of one of the main functions of the classroom setting. And that's why we have classrooms, is because engaging with people in real life is just more compelling than engaging with somebody that you can interact with. We process videos on YouTube differently when we know that we can comment on them and pause them and move ahead than if it's something we can't interact with. There are no rules. Actually, there are rules. You have to be in touch with what the psychological, cultural viewpoint is on things. And so here's Hulu. They put this big emoji for America's Funniest Home Videos, and it's just strange. Have you guys experienced that recently? It happened on my Facebook feed yesterday. There's this surfboard company, and they were like, "Yo, bro, check out the waves." And I couldn't tell if they were joking at first. It's like, what is going on? It's so strange. So there actually are rules. So turns out lit is no longer considered cool. And the first thing when I saw this on Twitter, I thought, like, if a company is telling you it's not cool, it was not cool way before that. By the time it reaches the level of the company, it's already lost its coolness. And while I don't agree with everything she said, but I like the notion of what she's saying here. She says who? It's the culture and the people that create the lingo that will let you know when it's cool or not. But I'll note that in her response, she did not use the word lit. She used litty, which I've come to know is actually cool still. I think it's, yeah. So here's a viewpoint that I think is useful. People expect advertising to add to culture. And so think of people's cultural viewpoints on things as if they're on a swing. And your advertisement, your media, the information you're putting out there is meant to push the swing. And if you're successful, then you observe the swing and you see how it's swinging. And then you find the right time and you say, okay, I'm going to give it a push. And if you fail, that's when you push the swing at the wrong time. It's still coming back too hard. It's going the wrong way. So you need to think about how you can optimize the timing and the content to maximally impact people. So people value authenticity. And actually, it's interesting. The emphasis on authenticity started with popular culture. Like, we started to have these shows like The Office, where they actually acknowledged the camera. Like, they acknowledged that they were on a TV show. I guess maybe like sitcoms did that too, when they had people laughing and applauding, which acknowledged that a crowd was there. Do you guys post out kind of videos of yourselves on social media? Yeah, like what is it, like Instagram? Okay, Instagram videos. Does anybody use YouTube for that? Okay. It's interesting, like the barriers of posting videos of yourself is relatively low. And in some cases, it's actually beneficial to have sort of cell phone quality videos. In some cases, like, it sends a particular message and can have usefulness. So culturally, the fact that that's acceptable is nice. So here's an advertisement that directly acknowledges authenticity.
Don't thank me. Thank the savings.
You can't skip this Geico ad because it's already over. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
So this ad is acknowledging that we have 5 seconds to get your attention. So we're only going to talk during the first 5 seconds, because after that you could skip the ad. And they're acknowledging that they're the ad. And sometimes that can be helpful in terms of connecting with people. It's just to say, hey, look, this is an ad, and here we go. We're doing our ad thing. So, and when we're engaged, we don't realize that we're being marketed to. And that's the thing is, like, when I've talked to people about being in marketing, their reaction is not always positive. They see it as this, like, manipulating people sort of viewpoint. But we're being marketed to in all aspects of our lives, including every politician. People, they have some type of marketing team, and they think about how people are going to respond to what they put out there. And when it's effective, we don't realize that it's marketing, just simply that. You know, people like Kanye West and, you know, Dolly Parton, they all are super smart. And most likely if they come across as being not super smart, it's just part of their branding. And because to get to that level, and you kind of have to be pretty smart. So Gary Vaynerchuk here, he's actually getting people voluntarily sending him a bunch of text messages. So, you know, typically when we get asked for a text message, it's like, oh, okay, like you might provide this useful PDF document, but you begrudgingly do it. This is somebody who's getting them completely voluntarily, like people actually want to do it. And it's because he's responding to them back. And I'm not sure how many companies are doing that. If you actually send them a message through their Facebook account or through their Twitter, that they're just going to respond back and answer your question. But it's a very interesting sort of alternative way of thinking about doing things. So if you're a company that wants to tell people about how powerful your blender is, you could do a 30-second commercial where you talk about how powerful your blender is and how great it is and put it on TV. Or you could do what Blendtec did and start a YouTube channel where you just blend things.
Will it blend? That is the question.
Yeah, it's super cheesy, and but super interesting. And it's very simple. And you can interact with people. So you have people in the comments saying, hey, can you blend up some golf balls? So yeah, getting creative. And you know, the whole notion of content marketing, which is that like, and so Intermark Group is now trying to build up a conversation about the psychology of marketing. And we're putting that out there on our YouTube. So I encourage you guys to check it out. If there's any topics that interest you, leave some comments, and you know, we'll respond to the comments. And like the goal is to continue learning about society and processing the world that we live in. So we talk about our social tribes, and word of mouth won't go away, which is something I was talking about. Authenticity, trying to understand that. These are ongoing conversations that we're having. Even looking at specifics like Dogtown and Z-Boys is a skateboarding team that how these small groups come and impact culture and society. So yeah, social listening is a really popular concept of just paying attention to what people are responding to. And that's actually been going on for probably forever, since humans have been using language. But some early examples include in the 1900s, somebody owned a railroad car, and they learned that they would make more money by turning it into a restaurant than they would by using it as a railroad car. And that's how the modern diner came about. Like the original diners used to be in old railroad cars. Again, we still have some of that in today's culture. We have like the old shipping containers that people are using. Somebody also around that time period started selling soap and then gave away free samples of baking powder. And then by paying attention, they learned that they were buying the soap for the baking powder. So they started selling baking powder, and they gave away free samples of gum. And then they learned that people were buying it because of the gum. And so they started selling gum, and this was Wrigley's chewing gum. And that's super smart. Like, just to be like, hey, like, maybe we have an idea. Maybe people would be more interested in this thing. Let's give it to them for free and see what they think. And then you can change the direction of what you're doing. And we see that happen all the time with these companies. Like Facebook just recently announced some dating feature that they have on there. YouTube actually started out in dating. A lot of these things I think did, because that's kind of like a fundamental way of how people being social and what they're interested in. But Facebook tries to get in the video space. Like they're constantly trying to keep your attention, and they're trying to make new ways to do that. And this is something I'm really interested in. Another great book, but you'll learn more by emulating from successful ideas outside your industry than by copying what your nearest competitor is doing. And there's tons of other industries that have super interesting ways that they're changing things that people can apply. The biggest one is music. I think in particular the hip hop industry, which is in Atlanta, but the way that they are creative with their marketing and the way they think about marketing, I think is probably like the most innovative way that people are thinking about it. And a lot of people aren't aware of that. Like a lot of people don't say, hey, let's look at what these hip hop artists are doing and what they think to shape how we market all of our range of other products. But this is interesting because Nipsey Hussle actually read this book Contagious, where he learned that this restaurant was selling $100 cheesesteaks. And so everybody is like, okay, like we have to go and try this $100 cheesesteak. Because that gets people talking again, it's a change. And this again points to the irrationality of people's behavior, which is that they will sometimes buy things when they're more expensive.
I got a few mentors that just put me on books and literature and all that. Big Bob Francis, one of them. And so, he told me about this book called Contagious.
Contagious,
Yeah, so I got to the second chapter of that, and it was just talking about how this restaurant owner in Philly started selling Philly cheesesteaks for $100 out of his restaurant. And it just was like, it set off all type of conversation. Everybody was talking about it. Then all type of influential people came through him and just wanted to check out why it was $100. Like Oprah came through and bought one. David Letterman bought one. He got all type of exposure and publicity. And then it became like a staple. And everybody started coming through supporting, buying a $100 cheesesteak. So I put the book down and I was like, yeah, we got to do that with the album.
Yeah, so there's artists who put out like $1,000 mixtapes, I think. Just these unconventional ideas. And I kind of want to do a talk on like how to social media like a rock star, because I do think that like taking this mentality of producing a single and the lead up to the single and things like that can be taken and applied in many domains. It's like you take your idea and then you package it in the way that is most compelling to people. And I think that's how Old Town Road became popular, is that they took a meme, just some video, and they overlaid the song on that video. And so people wanted to share the video because it was cool, and then they hear the song, and it just gets stuck in their minds. So one of the things that we've done, just adding a third dimension. Billboards don't have to be two-dimensional. For Fiora, they had advertised 30% more toilet paper, so we put a roll of toilet paper coming down off the billboard. For the Southern Museum of Flight, we depicted some skydiver who had dropped down on the billboard. And these are, really creative ideas that get people's attention and get people talking. Building anticipation. We had for Alabama tourism, we had a mural go up, but we had it go up over the course of a number of days so that they would be curious what's going up there. They would ask that. And, that can lead to them talking, lead to word of mouth. For the Birmingham Zoo, we also did that, where they had a dinosaur exhibit, this sort of animatronic dinosaurs. And instead of showing a commercial of the dinosaurs, we just showed a reaction of the animals at the zoo's reaction to the dinosaurs. So they were freaking out, they were running away. And so that'll build your curiosity. And when you build people's curiosity, when you sort of give them incomplete information, there's this like psychological need to have that information completed. So it's much more compelling. That's why, like, if you want to title your YouTube videos, it's really popular to ask a question, because then it's like we have this drive, this sort of immediate need to have that question answered when we see it like that. Yeah, so interaction increases engagement. We went to New York for Alabama tourism and used virtual reality to get people into the viewpoint of an Alabama brewery, and they drank from a beer as well. So they had the vision, they had the movement, they had the taste. We put sand, and they got to relax on the sand. And ever since I've been seeing these, I've wanted to go to the beach. So I do know I need to go down there at some point. This is the virtual reality of the canyon, Little River Canyon. And again, this is multiple things. it's also these positive psychological feelings that people get when they view nature that you're also tapping into. We had people, for Toyota Corolla, they designed their own vehicle. They could choose all these aspects of the vehicle, and then if a vehicle came in that aligned with what they were interested in and what they created, then we would let them know. And there's a psychological effect that, like, when you devote time to something, it's the commitment principle, but like when you devote a lot of time and resources to something, it gets in your brain, and then you sort of want to see that thing to completion. But ultimately, it's about just engaging with people. Like, you're actually learning about what they care about with vehicles and what they're interested in a vehicle. So advertising is more than advertising. Let's see, actually in this book, Spent, they talk about how almost this notion that advertising is almost ineffective, kind of like the analogy of the peacock tail. So a peacock advertises its fitness, advertises its good genes by the how fancy its tail is, but the tail is actually detrimental to the peacock because predators can see it, it slows them down. And so in some sense, like this cynical perspective of the purpose of advertising is to show that you have the capability of hiring the people who can do it and the ability to make the video and all of these things, which if you're able to do that, then you're most likely able to succeed, to satisfy me with a good meal or whatever your service is. It's like people will be more impressed with, they'll trust a plane, their trust in how well a plane is going to take them to point A to point B, more when there's good quality snacks on the plane. And, because like at the end of the day, we care about things that are sort of instinctual and fundamental to us and these indicators. And in the book Alchemy, it talks about when they invented typewriters, it didn't enhance people's productivity. Because somebody had to write it down first and then they had to type it out. So it actually like doubled the amount of work. But if you're a company that wants to demonstrate that you're a compelling, productive company, you had to demonstrate that you owned a typewriter, that you had a secretary, somebody who could do that. When they put BMW ads on the Super Bowl, they're not designed to sell people who watch the Super Bowl a BMW. That's not the function of them. They put that ad on the Super Bowl for the person who already owns the BMW, who needs other people to think that they're a fancy person who owns a BMW. They need to continue to convey the notion of how you think about a BMW owner. And when you put chairs out at a coffee shop, you're demonstrating that you believe that people are going to show up to your coffee shop to sit in the chairs and that you have the resources to put them out in the morning and take them out. So the fact that it takes effort is actually a useful thing. So putting out chairs at a coffee shop is a form of advertising, is a way of thinking about that. We always talk about how people buy Tylenol more than they buy the brand competitor, the generic competitor, even though by law they're supposed to be the exact same thing. But one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things brands do is it builds trust. It allows trust to happen. Because for whatever reason, if they don't give you what you need for your headache, that company is going to suffer the consequences. Like Tylenol has put their name on it. They've invested all these resources in their brand, and so they have something at stake if they fail. But a generic brand doesn't have anything at stake. They could just become another generic brand. I'll just wrap up by just highlighting these points that I think all of these things sort of connect together in the way that we need to think about the media that we put out in order to most effectively engage people. So yeah, thanks so much.
Any questions? Either about the material we've covered? Yes, ma'am?
How do you think that marketers in general and Intermark specifically will start responding to Facebook's lawsuits recently that they've been inflating their views? Will that change advertising strategies?
Yeah. So how are we gonna? I think Facebook probably is just going to decline, and I think it's been declining in its effectiveness. So we'll have to pay attention to where the new avenues are of getting people's attention. It's like there's like an early stage. There seems to be like this progression, so that the new thing that comes on, like Instagram, they have to be successful to a certain degree first to even put effective advertising out, even to build that infrastructure. So you can also target very early level things like Instagram that still have that organic reach and organic growth possibilities. Yeah.
Going back to your analogy earlier on the whole stock market thing, like within the stock market, it's hard to predict what the next big thing is going to be. You know, it's like in advertising, how can you try and predict what the next like Instagram is going to be, or like TikTok if it blows up to a higher level?
Yeah. I mean, I think just noting how people are engaging with it, like, I don't know, my perception of Instagram, for example, is that it's very superficial. At least the way I use it is like, I need to like all these things so that I pop up on their thing that I exist and things like that. And it feeds their algorithm to show me to other people. So personally, I'm not engaged. My attention isn't really going into it, but I see it as something valuable. But things like YouTube actually incentivize people's attention. And that's not just like how many likes did it get. It's what percentage of your time did you actually devote to watching this video. And sometimes I can like just let YouTube do its thing. I just sit back and it just shows me all these suggested videos and I get super into it and I'm like, wow, it's like really powerful when something like that can get your attention for an hour like that.
How far do you think is too far with the advertising as like almost a waste philosophy, like putting chairs outside your coffee shop when they might not be full? Good. Is live streaming your CEO playing ping pong and drinking mimosas all day also good? Like just hanging out, you know, with that much?
Yeah. Are you talking about Gary Vee, or is it just like, because he's a person who tries to document his entire life on social media?
In particular.
Okay.
Now there's an example of it.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, you have to be sensitive. And I think it's a little bit of both. You know, sometimes I do think that like how are you going to compete if you're not on social media? You know, and so it's almost like you have no choice. But then, you know, what I didn't talk about was like the notion of ROI, which is that if you spend $1, you should have some notion that you're going to get $2 back. And if that's the case, then you just keep spending. And it doesn't matter because you have an ROI on that. Yeah.
Do you have a target audience in mind when you do a billboard the same way you do when you do like a VR kind of thing or like a mural downtown? Like, is it kind of different for billboards?
Yeah, I mean, you just consider who's likely to drive through there. And so the Alabama tourism one was like, these are roads that go to New Orleans. And so that's sort of the demographics that we would think about.
Think about placement too, like, you know, if you're advertising for a restaurant or something, like making sure it's in an area where people would stop and go. So it's hard to target in terms of like age this through this because you don't know who's going to be driving through there. But
I was just kind of wondering about like the toilet paper one and like, because I personally haven't seen that, but I thought that was like cool, like the 3D kind of aspect of it, like kind of, I guess what was the goal behind that?
Yeah, for brand awareness, to get people to think of Fiora when they go into a store, buy that over Charmin or whatever. You're like, oh, I remember that billboard. That, you know, let me try this.
Do you guys try the strategy of I just noticed this summer, but like when I drive, like normally the first time I won't notice a billboard, but if you put like back to back within a certain amount of time, then I notice it. Is that like something you guys try?
Not for a client that like I've worked on in particularly, but it definitely like repeating things makes it stand out more in your memory. So.
Who's the lawyer? The insurer?
Yeah, Alexander Shannara.
Yeah. Rick Billboard in Alabama.
Yeah, the more times you see something, the more times it gets engraved in your brain. So that's his strategy behind that, is to spend a bunch of money on billboards, but now you know everybody knows his name, even if you don't use that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys.